Welcome to another edition of Mark's Inspiration. Glad you could join me here today as always. And it's a chilly morning in St. Louis, Missouri today, about 37 degrees Fahrenheit. We're waiting for it to warm up just a little bit before we go to work, so I have time for a short video. It's difficult for me to make long videos when we're really busy, which we are right now with my other company. But here we go. Dominance. I'll say it again. Dominance. We're going to talk about dominance. The problem with dominance is people hear that word and they think overbearing, jerk, a-hole, someone who tries to run the show with an iron fist. And that's not at all what dominance is. You cannot dominate anything unless you first dominate your life. Dominate yourself. Dominate your mind and your emotions. You must be the master of yourself before you can even consider mastering anything outside. Because as I have said many times before, the outer world is but a reflection of what goes on inside of you. Whatever you can't control will control you. It's amazing how people want to be a boss, a leader, but yet they cannot lead themselves. They cannot boss themselves. They are taken away by every outside occurrence and little crisis that happens, and they become emotional and upset. Hey, I've done it, I know. That's more of the feminine than the masculine. And if you're wanting to be a dominant male that attracts beautiful women, you have to be more in your masculine if you want to attract feminine women. I realize here in the U.S., femininity is becoming a thing of the past. The women are taught to have careers, to be like a man. When was the last time you shook a woman's hand where she actually gave you her hand as a lady does? No, they shake your hand, they squeeze it like they're a man. And as I've said before, that's a pet peeve of mine. They're not a man, so don't try to be a man. I'm not a woman, I'll never have a baby, so I'm not going to try to act like a woman that can have a baby. Although I did raise my 6 kids by myself for about 10 years, and I guess I'm still raising them, I did notice that I kind of got into my feminine somewhat because I took on that role. And I didn't realize that until I got out and started dating again after being married for 12 years and then dating about 6 years later because my kids were small and I raised them up. I didn't go out with anybody. So I went about 20 years without dating, plus being in the role of feminine of raising my kids. I found myself when I did start dating again, I was too emotional. I was too open, too vulnerable, as they say, too willing to express how I felt. And let me tell you something, that's not really what a dominant man does. Now, I think it's great if you express how you feel with your accountability partner, your mentor, or your best friend, your best male friend. But contrary to what women say, they don't want to hear that crap. They don't want to hear if you're afraid of something or that you had a childhood trauma. Trauma is the word you like. Everyone wants to use the word trauma nowadays. What, my dad whipped my ass? Is that a trauma? I don't know, maybe. It's just the way it was when I was a kid. I had a couple accidents on a bicycle. I ended up in the hospital in a coma, woke up the next day. Is that a trauma? No, it's just life. What I consider trauma is if you go out here and you're in a car accident and your best friend gets killed and you're watching him die, that's pretty traumatic. Or your parents die, that's traumatic. Someone breaks in your house, kills one of your family members, that's pretty traumatic. Or you get kidnapped and they hold you for ransom for, I don't know, for any amount of time. That would be traumatic. But I hear people talking nowadays because we have such a nation of snowflakes being raised up that every time I turn around, they're using the word trauma. Well, a dominant male doesn't look back on his past and think about his life being traumatized because he had a mean stepmother, because she slapped him around a little bit, okay? I mean, my God, come on. It's like everything is so, how do I say? It's so feminized because they look at everything like it's such a traumatic experience. I mean, if you perceive it that way, then that's what it's going to be in your life. I don't perceive it that way. Let me try to think of something that was traumatic in my life. I can't really think of anything. I had an alcoholic father who used to whip the crap out of me. Oh, okay, maybe I'm in denial. That's what they would say. No, it hurt. I was afraid of my dad, but I realized he did the best he could. It's just the way it was. I always had food, always had water. You look around the world, travel the world, and you want to see trauma, you'll see trauma. You'll see things that are really traumatic. People dying in the streets after getting run over by cars, people getting shot, people getting killed. In impoverished nations, these things are a daily occurrence. These are traumatic situations. Not if your stepmother mistreated you or your girlfriend dumped you. It's just my opinion, but if you make these things and use these words that make them into something that was just terrible and just, you don't know if you can get over it, that's exactly what it's going to be. If you want to be a dominant male, you first have to dominate yourself. And you cannot dominate yourself, your emotions. Let's say control yourself and your emotions. You cannot do that if you look at everything in your past as some big crisis or some big event. These are things that just happen. And these things happen to teach you something. Are you learning the lesson from it? I look back on my past and I'm glad that my father was exactly how he was, because it built the kind of person in me that I'm determined. I don't give up. I'm not afraid. Well, I'm afraid to take risks, but I do it. And I've failed many times. I've lost everything. My house, my kids. Several times I've had my kids taken away from me, screaming and crying. They didn't want to go. They were taken from me under false, under false accusations. Now, was that traumatic? It pissed me off. It was hard and difficult, but I'm not going to say it's traumatic. It might have been traumatic for the kids, but then again, that's the way they're going to have to view it as they get older. Your history, your life is but a perception. How do you want to perceive it? Do you want to perceive your life as a bunch of traumatic events that has formed you today? Or do you want to perceive your life and your past as events that have happened to make you the man you are today, and you're glad they happened because they strengthened you? If you don't have these so-called traumatic experiences, how do you ever expect to grow in inner strength? You can't. Just as the resistance that you use in the gym with the weights builds muscle, resistance in life, these traumatic experiences, when properly used, will make you a stronger man. Now, I'm not saying there aren't traumatic experiences. If a woman gets raped, physically beat, I'm not talking about one of these women that go out and get drunk and then she ends up having sex with somebody and the next day she feels shameful and regretful and says, well, I didn't agree. He raped me. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a woman who actually gets abducted and physically raped or knocked into the bushes and raped. Now, that's a traumatic experience, of course, for a woman. And if it happened to a man, it would be traumatic also. If you were held down and forcibly be raped by 5 or 6 guys or whatever it took to hold you down. I agree there are traumatic experiences, but what I'm talking about is looking back and I hear people talking about past trauma. It's like, maybe it's just a play on words, but in our society today of a lot of snowflakes, we have become so soft that everything has become a trauma. My mother wouldn't give me ice cream 2 days in a row. So it's really on how you perceive it. I'm not saying bad things don't happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. But how you word it, how you view it, is how it's going to affect you in your life today. Use these things to make yourself strong. A dominant male is strong. He views his past, his present, how he desires it to be, not how someone else or the media or society tells him he ought to view it. I'll give you a good example for myself. When I was about 14 or 15 years old, there was this older guy, right? So he used to mess with me. Okay, you know what I mean, mess with me. Now the word would be molest me. But I was 14, I was a kid. You know how young kids are, we're horny all the time. It felt good. So a couple times I was out with him, we were getting high, and he was probably I don't know, he was over 21. I was 14 or 15, and it felt good. But then one night we was out, and he started to do, like a 69 on me. I didn't like it. And I told him to stop, and he did, and that was the last time it ever happened. Okay, later on, years later, when I was going through they'd taken my kids, so they were asking me all these questions about, because I was accused of doing something to my children, which I didn't. Okay, they were asking me these questions, and I shared that with them. And they said, "Oh, well, you were, how they say, physically, you were molested, abused." I said, "Really?" Well, it felt good. I agreed to it, and then when I realized that wasn't who I was and told him to stop, he stopped. Now, did I know what was going on? Yes, I did. Did it feel good? Did I cooperate? Yes. So what they're saying to me, and what they'll say to a lot of people, and you too, is, okay, because you were 14, you didn't have the cognitive ability to understand what was going on, and this man took advantage of you. I don't view it that way. I knew exactly what was going on. I did it because I felt pleasure doing it. So, but they will tell you that you were taken advantage of, you were molested. I don't agree. No, that's not the way I perceive it. If they want to perceive it that way, that's fine, because that's a perception of a victim. I don't look at myself as a victim, nor should you. We have too many victims in the U.S. today. Victimization, or being a victim, is almost, promoted or grandized. That's not really the word I want. So if you want to be a dominant male, take responsibility for your actions in the past, the present, and in the future, because it's up to you. You have to control yourself and be accountable for what you do before you can be the kind of man that can dominate his own life, his own emotions, his own feelings, and then you can expect to be able to have some control over your outer situations, because you're controlling yourself on the inside. You're not a victim. Don't view your past, your present, or your future as being a victim. You are what you think you are. That's what my old boxing coach used to tell me, and there's a lot of truth in that. I hope this has been of value today. Hit that like button, subscribe. Have a great day.